Part B.2 Networking Basics Domain Servers. All right. Still, we are looking at the client-server communication basics. All right. How to locate a web server. All right. So let's look at a little more details. All right. How can we locate a web server on the internet? So last time we learned we can use IP address to locate a particular server on the internet. So now the question is, how? How do you do that? Can we use the IP address directly? This question. What I mean, so the question here is, can we use the IP address directly to locate a web server? This question. In other words, if you are given an IP address of a server, can you send a request to it? That's the question. The answer is yes. You can send a request to the server using its IP address. Okay. How do you do it? Pretty simple. So we can do it in this way. Okay. HTTP:// Now you put the specific IP address there. 159, for example. I just write some random number. Okay, I don't know. So which server has this IP address? Okay, just some random number. Okay, so I put there, then I can send a request to that server. Okay, so you can do that, but the way to connect to a server in this way, not very convenient for most of the people. Yeah, because it is too hard to memorize each IP address, harder than telephone number, right? Yeah, much harder than memorize telephone number. Yeah, yeah. So this problem must be solved. How to convert non-human readable IP address like this, non-human readable IP address to something more human readable. So that problem must be solved. Okay, yeah. And the solution is very simple here. So let's look at the solution. All right. The solution, we just try to get a similar solution from a different problem. Yeah. Think about your address book, because usually it is not easy to memorize many phone numbers. Then you have a phone book, address book. Yeah. So when you use your phone book, address book, each name of your friends, each name of your friends, that's human memorable, right? You know the name of your friends. So that's human memorable. But the phone number, relatively harder to memorize. Okay? But in your phone book, you have one-to-one mapping. So then you can, look up in your phone book, address book, easily, relatively easier, so you can get the phone number, so then you can call. We use the same idea to solve the non-human memorable IP address problem. Here, we do this. Phone number corresponds to an IP address. Okay? That corresponds to domain name. Domain name usually more human memorable, like www.yahoo.com. That's human memorable, right? Google.com, UMSL.edu. That's human memorable. Okay, yeah. And behind each domain name, there is an IP address. But we don't worry about it. We never need to memorize any of them. Okay? But the question is, how do we do the mapping? Because we do not keep an address book doing that. Tedious work. We don't want to do that. Address book regarding the IP addresses. Then there is a special service for that. That problem can be solved with a special service. Domain name service. Here, let me explain that domain name service. All right. Here you can see we are the end user here. We want to send a domain name to the server. All right. Then the whole thing is divided into two parts. To get the problem solved, the whole thing divided into two parts. The first part, get IP address, corresponds to this domain name. The second part, then, because you have the IP address, you can access the specific server you want to reach. Yeah. The first step, now this step, to get IP address. Okay. All right, so here there is a DNS resolver. DNS means domain name service. DNS, domain name service. In our next slide, we will look at this DNS a little more. Yeah. So domain name resolver. So the first time, it will send you to the root, the DNS root name server. Yeah. There is a hierarchical structure, root. So you get to that root name server. Yeah. The root name server will, going down, go to the next level. Yeah, because there are so many large number of domain names in the world. So you have to go to many different levels to get your final IP address. So here you can see them back and forth many times. Finally, reach the one that corresponds to your current domain name. Okay? So at the end, the true IP address is sent back to your machine. So that's the first step is done. Then the second step. Then your browser, after your browser gets that IP address, then send it to the real server. Okay? For the request. Then that server returns response. The response contains some data and send it back to your browser. So your browser renders the whole page. Now, one request completes. That's the procedure. Okay. All right. Next, let's look at the DNS part a little more. Domain name system. First, DNS, the system used to translate human memorable domain names into corresponding numeric IP addresses. Yeah. Like your phone book, yeah. But this time, this is a huge phone book. Okay? Organize all the domains in a tree structure, hierarchical, hierarchical. Tree-like structure. Yeah. All right. Yeah, DNS is a hierarchical and decentralized naming system. So we know that decentralized, so independent, each node inside that hierarchical structure, independent. Now, if one node has some problem, stop working, so then it's okay. All other nodes can still work, okay? Can still provide services, to make the whole system robust. All right. Connected to internet or private network. Connected to internet, so then you need a public IP address. Private network, so you need a private IP address. But private IP address is under certain public IP address. So then no confusion. All right. The top hierarchy of the domain DNS, we call them root name servers. So there are a relatively small number of root name servers. All right, so we do not get into too much details. All right. Then the root domain contains top level. Because the hierarchy, the tree-like structure, you start from the root, top level. But not just one root, remember, because for the whole domain system, domain name system, there are several, something like 13, in the world, 13 root name servers. Okay, starting from there, then it will tell you which server, which name server to go in the next level, then another level, until you reached your destination. So TLD, top level domain. When you make a request for the domain name, send to one of the names. Going actually here, back and forth many times. Each time going down one level in the hierarchy, one level down. And at the end, the IP address is back. Right. That's the result. Then the domain name service is completed. So you can use that IP address. You can send a request to the real server you want to reach. That's the whole procedure. All right. Next, web hosting facilities. Let's look at this important services in the business. We know in order to run business for a company, you need to create a website, and sometimes people may like to run many web applications on their servers. But there is one problem. For some of the companies, if you want to buy your own servers, maintain, the cost is very high. So for small companies, they cannot afford that. Too expensive. You need to hire, many technicians to maintain your servers. Too expensive. Then this web hosting provide affordable services. Good services, but with affordable prices. Yeah. So the picture like this. Hosting servers. Those companies, they buy many servers, provide services for large number of companies in the world. Each company only pay small amount of money because they support large number of companies, so they can still, get some profit. Yeah. For each company, they do not pay much. They just pay, reasonable amount of rent fee. Yeah. All right. Provides physical storage for website on the servers. So your files stored in their servers. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So makes the files typically source code, images, the things you want to put on the web. Yeah. And there are many tools you can use. Yeah. Like that. Yeah. Very good services. Yeah. But the price, very affordable. Yeah. Very cheap. Yeah. Comparing with, if you want to do your own, very little. Yeah. So that's why, especially for small business, small companies, yeah, it is good choice. Yeah. But for large companies, because they have a lot of resource, a lot of money, so they can afford their own team, running important data on their own servers. Yeah. All right. Renting, buying space. Yeah, so you pay. Yeah, I did that. Yeah, I did. I did that. So I remember the renting fee less than $10 per month. So when I use that, very cheap. Yeah. Most hosting companies require you own your own domain name. That's convenient because domain name is not very expensive. Although every year you need to pay certain fee, $10-something, as I remember, for each domain name. Sometimes more expensive, sometimes cheap, but usually you can get a reasonable price for a domain name. Yeah. Otherwise, I also know some people, they do not own their own domain name. They share with other people. Yeah. That's also for some small business owners, they just want to display some information or run some simple web applications. So they do that under one domain name. So many users share the same domain name, but each one has a different subdomain name. Yeah, subdomain. Yeah, that kind of resource can also be shared among many users. Yeah. All right. Then the content. Yeah. Because you have the FTP service, so you write your code, develop your code on your own machine, then you use FTP to upload into the hosting servers, your account. So then, other people can access your web pages. Yeah. Yeah. So the static content like that, and you also need to add a dynamic content. Some people only post some basic information of their companies, so they just use static content. That's it. That's simple. Yeah. But for many advanced users, they need to run web applications, doing interactions, transactions with their customers. Yeah. And collect data from the customers stored in the database. Yeah. So using this part. Then those users, they have to write dynamic code. Yeah. Not just static. These are the static. They need to write dynamic code. Okay. Dynamic code, two types. At the client side, using JavaScript. Okay. Then, server side. Then you need server-side programming language. For example, PHP is one, Java, another one, and the .NET. Okay. Also, many people use .NET technology. Yeah. All right. That's pretty much the basic information related to, networking. Yeah. Next video, I want to talk about programming. Yeah. Mainly the server side programming. Yeah. The basic information. All right.